Welcome to our podcast, where we talk about the interesting, frustrating, and inspiring experiences we have as people with strongly held religious views working in corporate IT. We're not here to preach or teach you our religion. We're here to explore ways we make our career as IT professionals mesh, or at least not conflict with our religious life. This is Technically Religious.
It's our last episode of the year, and so we're going to do what every major Hollywood production does.
Take a vacation to Hawaii and bring the film crew so we can expense it?
No.
And then do a retrospective episode so that we don't have to actually create that much?
Okay, so you're half right. Actually, maybe a third right, because we're still going to do a full episode.
And no Hawaii.
No Hawaii. So let's dive right in. I'm Leon Adato.
And I'm Josh Bigley. And while we normally start the show with shameless self-promotion, today we're going to do an end-of-the-year economy-size version, like we shopped at Costco.
Right, exactly. For all the stuff that we need for the end of year, all our parties and everything like that. Right. So instead of introducing just the two of us, we're going to introduce everyone who's been on the podcast this year. So here we go. Josh, kick it off.
All right, so Josh Bigley, Tech Ops Strategy Consultant, now with New Relic. You can find me on the Twitters at jbigley. I am officially, as of this last week, officially ex-Mormon.
Do I say congratulations?
I think so. Maybe there's a Hallmark card for it. I don't know. But yeah, no, we officially resigned this week. It came through Thursday, Wednesday. I don't remember.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's it. We're done.
Okay. All right. And I'm Leon Adato. I'm a head geek at SolarWinds. You can find me on the Twitters at Leon Adato. I also pontificate on technical and religious things at adatosystems.com. I am still Orthodox Jewish. I am not ex anything. And in the show notes, just so you know, we're going to list out everybody that we talk about in the next few minutes, along with all of their social media connections and the episodes they appear in. So you can look them up. We're just going to go back and forth on this one, so I'm going to kick it off. Doug Johnson was on our show. He's the CTO of Wave RFID.
Destiny Bertucci is the product manager at SolarWinds, a product manager. They have lots of them. You can find her on the Twitters at Des Says.
And also a program manager at SolarWinds, Kate Asaf.
All right, and Roddy Hassan, Technical Solutions Architect at Cisco.
Al Rashid, who's contractor and virtualization admin extraordinaire.
Indeed, extraordinaire. Mike Wise, President of Blockchain Wisdom. I see what he did there.
Yeah. Blockchain Wisdom, right, whatever. Okay. Keith Townsend, who is CEO of CTO Advisor.
Yakhil Kelmanson is a software engineer at Pivotal. Yay.
I'm so glad that you got to say his name again. Corey Adler, who's lead developer at Park Place.
Rabbi Ben Greenberg is developer advocate at Vonage.
Stephen Hunt, or Steven, as we like to call him. Stephen Hunt, who's Senior Director of Product Management at DataCore Software.
All right, Leon, you're going to have to help me here because I know I'm going to mispronounce this name.
Go for it. It's a hard H.
Chaim Weiss, front-end Angular developer at DecisionLink.
There we go.
I feel like we probably should have, done that a little different and not made the guy who does not
speak Hebrew? Do all the Hebrew? No, we did it exactly right. We did it
You are a scoundrel.
I am. So, hey, you can have me say all the hard Mormon names.
I definitely. Oh, we need to insert some of those. All right, let's talk about numbers because, I'm a number geek. I love numbers. You called me out today on Twitter because I was complaining about a certain $100 billion investment account that a certain former church that I formerly belonged to might have, and I was comparing it to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Our numbers don't have nearly as many zeros.
No, not nearly as much. And the numbers we're talking about are not financial. The numbers that we're going to talk about is just who's been listening to the episode. So I think I mentioned at the top of the show, this is our last episode. It's number 38 for the year. We got a late start in the year, but we've been almost every week. So 38 episodes. Yay! And you can find us on a variety of platforms. You can find us on, I'm just going to do this in one breath, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Podbean, YouTube, Player FM, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and of course you can listen directly from the website at technicallyreligious.com.
Wow, congratulations. That was well done.
Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about who's listening. Or maybe how many people are listening. So as of this recording, or prior to this recording, we've had over 2,100 listens and downloads. Over 21. Does that mean like 2101? Are we?
Anything between 2101 and a billion.
Sweet.
But you have to figure that if it was anything close to, say, 3,000, we probably would have said it.
That is true. So over 2,100 listens, and because we like math, that's about 50 listeners per episode. Thanks, Mom. Appreciate it.
Right. It's not necessarily listeners. It's just people who've listened. So yes, it could have been both of our moms clicking the podcast repeatedly. Hopefully that's not the case. And in those 2,100 listens, the results are that the top 5 episodes for the year, based on the listen count, our number 1 episode is also our number 1 episode. Religious Synergy podcast episode number 1 is first with 89 listeners.
That's going way back.
Yeah.
Tied actually for number 1, but not the first episode, was episode 12, Fixing the World One Error Message at a Time. That was a good episode.
It really was. There were some amazing aha moments for me in that one. Number 3 is episode 17, Pivoting Our Career on the Tip of a Torah Scroll, which is where I was talking with Corey Adler, Rabbi Ben Greenberg, and Yechiel Kalmanson about their respective transitions from the rabbinate, from rabbinic life, or just yeshiva life into becoming programmers, which was kind of a weird, interesting pivot in and of itself. And that had 76 listeners.
76. Following up to, that really riveting discussion. Honestly, it was very interesting to me. Is this whole idea of imposter syndrome, which apparently I am imposing on you by making you listen to this episode. I don't know. Episode 11 was imposter syndrome with 71 listeners. I would encourage others to listen to it because it's still very, very relevant.
Yeah, there was, again, that was another one where I think we had a few aha moments, both in ourselves, like, oh, that's right. That's that's a good way to look at it. That's an interesting way to, some ways to deal with imposter syndrome, which I think in IT is definitely a thing. And the last of the top 5 is episode 3. So going again way back, being a light unto the nations during a Sev1 call. I think the Sev1 call is what got people's attention. And that had 68 listeners.
I want to point out that this is the first time in my entire career that I have not been on call.
Wow.
Right? I realized that my very first, maybe my second week at New Relic, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not on call anymore. No one's going to call me when there's a Sev1. It was weird.
Yeah, that's and that's something we're going to talk about in the coming year. One of the episodes is how we have to almost rewire our brain for different positive feedback loops when we significantly change our role. And that was something that actually Cherry Majors talked about on Twitter about a month ago, is going from developer to CEO, CTO, and then back to developer, and how it's just a completely different positive reinforcement model and what that's like, what that does. So we'll talk about that. But yeah, it's really weird when you make the transition. As far as numbers, I also want to talk about where people are listening from. I will say, obviously, the largest number of our listeners come from the United States, about 1,586 or 82% of our listeners from the U.S. But that's not everything. It's not all about the U.S., as many people not in the U.S. remind us.
Canada's pretty far down the list. The UK came in at number 2 at 104. So thanks, Jez, for listening to all of our episodes 3 times. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, something like that. That was the numbers, right? Again, a couple of our UK listeners just kept on clicking. Interestingly, number 3 position is Israel with 73 listens. So I can think of a few people, Ben Greenberg being one of them, but Sharon Zeitzman and a few other, and Aaron Wolf, are people I know there, but who knows where those other 70 clicks came from.
Are you asking your son to click every week as well?
He actually is in yeshiva. He doesn't have access.
Oh, interesting. So you're not gaming. All right, I get you're not gaming the system. I appreciate that. So number 4, Germany. I don't know anyone in Germany. Well, no, I don't.
Sasha, Giza, another head geek. He's in Germany. Actually, he's in Cork, but I don't know how he VPNs things. So. He's either the UK folks or he's the Germany folks. Who knows? Let's see. Number 5 position is Finland with 38 listeners. And then we get to
Canada.
Oh, Canada.
28. Yay VPN. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. So Canadians need to up your game. Puerto Rico comes in next with 8 listens or 8 listeners. It's hard to tell.
Austria.
Wait,
people listen from Austria?
They listen to us from
Five.
Austria.
5 people in Austria. Yay, Austria.
Right. And Australia, not to be confused with Austria, also 5 listens. And number 10.
Czech Republic. Number 4. All right, with 4. I don't know anybody in the Czech Republic either.
So I know a lot of SolarWinds developers are in the Czech Republic. So that could be it. So
Fantastic.
Thank you. There's more stats than that. I mean, it goes down all the way to Vietnam and the Philippines and the Netherlands with 1 listen each. I don't know who it is. Whoever the person is from Belgium, thank you for listening. Same thing for France and Japan. But we appreciate all the people who are listening.
Our Bahamas listeners, all 2 of you, if you'd like us to come and visit, we'd be more than happy to do that, especially during the cold winter months. So just get a hold of us. We'll arrange flights.
And the 2 listeners from Switzerland, I apologize for everything I might say about Switzerland. I didn't have a delightful time when I was there in 2000, and I'm kind of take it out on you sometimes. So thank you for listening anyway. All right, so where are people listening? So that's where geographically, but how are people listening? I know I listed out the platforms that we promote on, but actually people are listening in a variety of different ways. What are some of them?
I mean, so browser, 379. So almost 20% of you are listening to the browser, which means, hey, you're listening to us at work. Great. Now get back to work and do your job.
Right. Well, they can listen while they work. It's okay.
Whistle while they work?
No, listen.
Oh, I thought we were promoting Disney Plus, all of us.
No, we are not promoting Disney Plus. We are not going to do that. The next platform or agent that's being used is Overcast, which is interesting. 235 listens came from the Overcast platform.
Apple Podcast came in at 168.
So I'm willing to bet that that's Destiny and Kate, who are both Apple fanatics, and they are just clicking repeatedly.
Nice. All right. Hey, yay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for clicking repeatedly. We appreciate that. OKHTTP. I don't even know what that is.
It's an interesting little platform that some people are using, and it's number 4 on the list, so 165 listens. Pocket Casts is 133 listens.
My preferred platform, actually. Podcast Addict, 124.
Spotify, which actually is how I like to listen to a lot of stuff. Spotify has 96 listens.
The Podbean app, 94 listens.
Right, and that's actually how we're hosting. We'll talk about that in a minute. iTunes. So I'm not sure exactly the differentiation between Apple Podcast and iTunes, but iTunes is at 72 listens. And in the number 10 spot,
Google Podcasts, where I started listening to a lot of podcasts, 70 listens. And then, I mean, the list is pretty long after that. There's a lot of diversity out there.
Yeah, it's not just like 11111, all the way down after that. There's a bunch of them. Player FM and Bullhorn and CF Network and things like that. So
Watch OS?
Yeah, Watch OS. People are listening to it on their watch now. It's,
nice.
And you've got, iHeartRadio, Facebook app, Twitter app. People are listening to us in a lot of different ways, which is kind of interesting. So what do these numbers tell us? Okay, so those are the numbers, but what are we getting from this?
People in the US like to listen to us on their watches.
That would be a connection that you could possibly draw, but probably not accurate. The first thing is, we have a long way to go. I think that 2,000 listens in the better part of a year, 50 listens per episode, if you just divide it mathematically, there's a lot more growth that we can do. So if you're listening and you think, boy, it would be so much easier to listen to this if you just blah, blah, please let us know. We want to make this interesting and listenable, whether you are listening to it live or meaning, from a podcast platform, or you're reading it through a transcript or what have you. Please let us know what we can do to make the podcast more consumable for you or your friends or family or coworkers.
If that suggestion is that I don't participate anymore as well to make it more listenable, let Leon know and he'll let me down gently.
Right, and vice versa. Right. Vice versa. I could see it going either way. I really could.
Definitely.
So right. And I think also the numbers are interesting in terms of the ways that people are listening. And I think that tells us something a little bit about where we might want to advertise or promote.
Agreed.
Along the way. That, that Overcast was really a surprise for me. I did not expect that. It's not on the list of things that I had targeted. And yet there it is. People are listening to it. So that might tell us where we want to reach out to people.
And it's funny too, because both you and I participate a fair bit on Twitter. And LinkedIn, and we've been known to, both retweet and post about our podcast on those two platforms. I'm surprised because I would have expected more people to be listening via one of those platforms like Twitter, in tweet listening. So
Yeah, it is interesting, and maybe that's something we need to find a way to enable more of. I don't know. That's so we're gonna dig through those numbers and see what else we can find. Again, if you see something in those numbers that we didn't, let us know. The next thing I want to do is go relatively quickly through some behind the scenes. I've had some folks ask, well, how exactly do you make the podcast? Either because they're interested in doing one of their own, or because they just are interested in that stuff. So. The behind the scenes stuff. First of all, we use a variety of microphones because we have guests from all over the place. So since Josh and I are the two primary voices you're going to hear, I use a Blue Yeti microphone, which I love.
Yeah, and I use a Jabra Pro 930, which I use both for work and for the podcast. And I think the takeaway here is you don't have to go and drop 100 or 200 or more on a specialized microphone if you're
Right.
just going to be doing a podcast from home. If you're going to have more than one guest, it gets really awkward when people want to hug up against my face to talk into my mic.
Yeah, it leads to some awkward questions, in the house.
Right? Yeah. So, why do you have Leon's whiskers on your sweater? It's just weird.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, you don't need a lot. Now again, I'm really enjoying the Blue Yeti. Destiny turned me onto it when we first started doing, talk about podcasts and doing them, and it was really a worthwhile investment for me. But I wholly support what Josh was saying, is you can get good quality sound out of a variety of low and low cost microphones. To record the podcast, we use Cast, which you
Okay.
can find. Yeah.
Hold on a second. Can I point out how awesome it is that a bunch of D&D geeks use a platform called Cast to record the show?
Yes. Okay. It is kind of cool. And yes, I do have a little bit of, nerdery in my head when I say, okay, I'm going to cast now. Oh, you'll find Cast at tryca.st, TriCast. So you can find that there, and it's really economical. It's $10 a month for, I think it's 20 hours of recording. So for a home podcast, you can fit the time that you can export individual tracks, or you can export a pre-mixed version or whatever. It gives you a lot of nice granular controls, and they even serve as a hosting platform, but we're not using it. And speaking of exporting, I export individual tracks for each voice, and then I'll do the audio editing in Audacity, a free tool. It does everything that I need it to do. And if the sound is horrible, it's my fault because it's me using Audacity. If the sound is amazing and you love it, it's purely because Audacity is an amazing tool to use.
Wait, we edit this show?
We do. I try to take out a lot of the ums and ahs, and every once in a while we really mess up and we have to go back or something like that. I edit that out. Most of the time. I think episode 11 the unedited version ended up getting posted, but we didn't say anything terribly embarrassing in that one.
We usually say all sorts of terribly embarrassing things that we publish.
Well, right. Right. The embarrassing stuff is the best part.
So we as a podcast, we try to be very inclusive and accessible. And for our listeners who don't actually listen, who are hearing impaired, we use Temi for doing transcription. And I mean, that's something that I picked up from you about halfway through this year, and I've really enjoyed that experience. And today, as we were prepping for the show, I realized that doing the transcription isn't just for people who are hearing impaired. It's also very much for us because we post all of those transcriptions, and I was looking for a particular episode, something that we had said in these past 37 episodes, and I was able to go and search on technicallyreligious.com and just find it. Boom, just like that.
Right. So that is a secondary benefit that I like. Of course, I said that we needed to do transcribing because I have a lot of friends who are deaf or hard of hearing. I also have a lot of friends for whom English is not their first language, and so having the transcript works really well. And yes, it makes it very searchable. We can go back and find where we said something really easily. We don't have to listen to hours and hours of recordings just to see where was it that Doug talked about being the worst person to invite to a Christmas party or what, which was hysterical, by the way. So yeah, it comes in really handy, and it's a little bit extra work. We host on Podbean. I mentioned that earlier. So that's where the episode gets uploaded to when it's finally done. And Podbean pushes things out to just about everything else. It pushes out to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. a whole mess of platforms. And then I manually repost it to technicallyreligious.com. And that does the actual promotion of the episode out to Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
Interesting. And then I think that it's important that our listeners know that we invest between 3 and 5 hours per episode. Well, we've certainly gone longer. Some of our episodes in the prep, the recording, and then the dissecting. I mean, we're probably up around 8, sometimes 10 hours for a particular set of episodes. Those two-parters that we've done, they've run really long. But yeah, 3 to 5 hours a week on top of our full-time gigs as husbands and fathers. And jobs. Apparently we have to have jobs in order to make money and feed ourselves. And so, yeah, it's a labor of love.
Yeah. My family's they're much more solicitous of my saying I want to go record a podcast when they've eaten, regular.
Yes. Yeah. They're totally accepting of that, right?
Yeah. That makes things easier. And, I think the message there is that if you feel the itch to do a podcast, it's accessible. It's relatively easy to do. It requires more or less some free or cheap software. I told you that Cast is $10 a month. Temi, one of the reasons why I like it is that it is 10 cents a minute for the transcribing. So, a 30-minute episode is $3.
Nice.
It's really, really affordable to do. So, the costs are relatively low between that and hosting and Podbean. So it's really accessible to do. Don't think that there's a barrier to entry, that money or even level of effort is a barrier to entry. And that means also that you can take a shot at it, make some mistakes, figure it out. I fully ascribe to Ira Glass's story that he did about the gap. That when you first start to do something, there's this gap between what you see in your head in terms of quality and how it comes out initially, that it may not be what you envision it can be, but you have to keep at it. You have to keep trying, because ultimately you'll get there, because it's your sensibility and your vision that really is what's carrying you through, not necessarily your technical acumen at the start. That comes later. So that just a little bit of encouragement. If you think you want to do this, absolutely try. Reach out to us on the side, either on social media or email or whatever, and say, hey, I just need some help getting started, or can you walk me through the basics of this or that? We would love to help see another fledgling podcast get off the ground.
This is why I had 4 children. The first 3, I'm like, phew, all right, that's it. Obviously, I've really messed up. And the 4th one, maybe I should have a 5th. I don't know.
Who knows? Well, okay, so I routinely and publicly refer to my oldest daughter as my pancake kid. When you're making pancakes and you make the first one and it's like overdone on one side and kind of squishy on the other and misshapen and kind of, that's, and the rest of them come out perfectly circular and golden brown and cooked all the way through because the griddle's finally up to the right temperature and everything. But that first pancake comes out and it's just a little weird. And my daughter is the pancake kid. So, moving on from pancake children and how the sausage gets made. Having made the sausage, I think we both have some moments in some episodes that were our favorites. And I'd like to start off. I got a little bit nostalgic about this. So my top favorite moment was actually when we had Al Rashid on, and you and Al ended up getting into this 80s music nostalgia showdown where every other comment was an oblique reference to some song that was, top 40 radio at some point during the decade. It was, by the end of the episode, it was wonderful and awful and cringeworthy and delightful all at the same time. And I just sat there with my jaw hanging open, laughing constantly. I had to mute myself. It was amazing.
Wow. I mean, Cher would say, if I could turn back time.
See, it was like this. It was like this for 35 minutes straight. It was nothing but this. Okay, so that was one. The second one was, and we talked about this earlier with the top episodes, fixing the world one error message at a time. There were just some amazing overlaps that came out during that episode, to where we saw that, the pair programming may have had its roots, whether it knows it or not, in the idea of chavruta or partner style learning in yeshiva. That, that was just a total like, oh my goodness, like, again, an aha moment for me. So that was a really interesting one as we were talking about it. And finally, not a specific episode, but just every episode that we were together, and that's most of them, the time that I got to spend with you, Josh, as we planned out the show, sort of 30, 40 minutes of prep time before we record, and we just had a chance to catch up on our lives and our families and things like that, and really share. And that's something that the audience is never going to necessarily hear. We weren't recording, and it's just, it was just personal banter between us. But, we worked together for a very brief time, at the same company, but then we worked together, on the same tools and the same projects far longer than that. And this really just gave us a chance to deepen that friendship. And I really value that. And to that end, the episode that is titled Failure to Launch, for me, was really a very personal moment. It was a really hard moment for me, where my son was going through a hard time. And as a parent, when you see your kids struggling, it just tears you apart. And both the prep and actually the execution of that episode, I think, was, for me, a testament to our friendship, in audio, like in a podcast. That was you being really supportive of me and helping me think through and talk through those moments. And you shared a lot of yourself in that episode also. And I think that was it, sort of emblematic of this, again, the secondary benefit of the podcast. The first benefit is just being able to share these ideas and stories with the public. But the secondary benefit for me was just how much friendship we were able to build and share throughout this last year.
And I have to remind the audience that your son, he stayed in Israel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and he's doing absolutely fantastic. So that time for you and I to commiserate, to be a virtual shoulder, to snuggle your head on, and yeah,
that's how the whiskers got.
That is how the whiskers got there.
Angela, if you're listening, that's how it happened. That is.
It's absolutely how it happened.
Don't think anything else.
No, I agree. Those are the things that you don't really value until suddenly they happen, and you realize that for the past year, we've spent more time together than probably most of my friends. It's just weird. I mean, life is busy, and you squeeze friendships in between other things, but this was something that we carved out every week. So, I mean, I got to spend, 90 minutes, so 120 minutes a week just chatting with you, on top of the chatting we did in social media and whatnot. So 100% super powerful. I often say, my best friend in the world doesn't live anywhere near me. He lives in Cleveland. So it's great. So,
and that's the amazing part about the internet in general. But yeah, this podcast has helped. Okay, so those were my favorites. Josh, what are yours? I've got the tissues out.
Yeah, you got them. All right. So my first one was recently making you out yourself and your ongoing feud with Adam Sandler.
Sorry, Adam. It goes all the way back to college. Couldn't stand you. Oh, I'm sure you're a much better person now, but you were impossible to deal with back then. So.
I mean, we were all impossible to deal with at that age. I'm just going to point that out.
That's true.
There's a reason that we send our kids to college. Just saying. There's also a reason that some animals eat their young. Also saying that.
Right. Medea was merely misunderstood. Right. She was just having a bad day that many mothers can commiserate with, right?
Okay. Also, I enjoy at least once an episode, sometimes more, reminding you that you did abandon me after 4 days to take a role as a head geek at Solar Winds.
Mea culpa, maxima culpa. I'm so sorry. Yes, I know.
And I think that will probably go on my tombstone. Do you remember when Leon left me or something?
Again, hard to explain to your family why that's on your tombstone, but okay.
I mean, it's going to be a big tombstone. Don't worry. Don't worry. And I think to your failure to launch episode, one of the moments that, not when it happened, but in retrospect, was sharing with the world that I suffer from depression, and that it's okay. We talked about that later on. We talked about the power of reaching out to people who say, look, I suffer from depression, and it's okay to suffer from depression. And people who know me and who know me well will know that sometimes it's very situational, but to tell the entire world, or at least 2,100 people or 2,100 listens, that I suffer from depression, right. It's fine. It really was. It
came out okay. And that actually arose from a previous episode. So the episode we're talking about is Fight the Stigma. And the previous episode, it was like in passing, and it was very, to the listener, it was very, non-committal. It was just, and I suffer from depression, and et cetera, et cetera. Actually, that was the failure to launch episode that you mentioned it. And after we'd stopped recording, I said, wow, that seems so easy for you. Was it a big deal? And you said, yeah, it was a huge deal. Like my heart was beating in my chest, and it really was. It didn't seem like it, but it was a big admission. We said, we need to explore this a little bit more. We need to go into it. And it was really brave. I know that that's terrible. Like, oh, well, you're such an inspiration. Like, don't turn you into that. But hopefully it made a difference in other people who were listening, but it was really a big thing for us who were doing the recording.
Yeah. And I will say that, in addition to that depression admission, this podcast has really been a part of my transition away from Mormonism. I mean, we started talking about this podcast a year before we actually started the podcast. So I was kind of in the throes of it, but I mean, 30 to 60 minutes a week of being able to hear other people's perspectives who may or may not share our religious views or former religious views in my case was really powerful for me and helped me process through my transition away from Mormonism a lot faster than most people. In the community, I've seen people that are going on decades of trying to transition away from Mormonism, and I did it in under 2 years.
Right. And I think part of that, and this is one of the foundational ideas behind the Tales from the Tamo Cloud series that we've started to do, is to talk about people's journeys, both their technical journeys and also their religious journeys, and to make sure that the listeners understand that life is a journey. I know that's really cliche, that there's a place where you are today that is different from where you stood before at the beginning when you were growing up, that the house that you grow up in and the traditions in that house are valid and they are a thing, but that may not be what you do now. You may be doing what you may think of as more or less or different, and that's normal. That we have multiple voices on here who say, I started off like this, and then I was this, and now I am this, and this is how I got from here to there. And the thises in that conversation could be, I started off on help desk, and then I was a storage engineer, and now I'm working as a customer advocate. Or it could be that I started off as, Protestant, and then I was disillusioned and I was nothing, and now I'm, born again evangelical Christian or whatever. And people, that those transitions are normal and healthy and not an admission of failure. It's an admission of life.
You forgot to include my transition from working in technology and despising sales to now working in pre-sales and being part of the sales cycle. I mean, I've literally gone to the dark side.
You really have, and we're probably going to have to talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
After Star Wars is out for a while, so we're not spoiling anything for you.
Exactly, right. I will also point out that it is moments like this that are so powerful for me. I quote you, Leon, in real life so often that I'm pretty sure people are convinced I am considering converting to Judaism.
I know that you got that comment, especially when you were still involved in the church and you were running Sunday teaching programs, and you'd say, and I think the class would say, and what does your friend Leon think about
it really was hilarious. It would be like, so I have a friend, and then be like, and his name is Leon.
Right.
It was fantastic. And then I know that my all-time favorite tagline of this past season came from episode 30, when good people make bad choices, and it involved melons.
I'll play the clip.
Oh, wonderful. I think that's better than me reading it because, yes, play the clip. In the Bible, Matthew records, "By their fruits ye shall know them."
So, ironically, we're not supposed to be judges, but we're supposed to be fruit inspectors.
Doug, are you looking at my melons?
I cannot be having this conversation.
I don't know why we played that clip.
Because we have no shame. It just talking about that clip took up a good solid 5 to 10 minutes of solid laughter of us just trying to do that. And that represents some of the joy. So those were some of our favorite moments. If you have some of your favorite moments, please share it with us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook. There's, post again on LinkedIn. You can share it in the comments area on the website, anywhere that you want to. All right. So I want to transition over to looking ahead. We look back a little bit. In the coming year, what are we thinking Technically Religious is going to move into in that idea of constantly improving? And I'll start off by saying that we're really going to work on improving the production quality. I think we have some room to grow, that we can get better. I'm getting better at, again, editing the audio and getting better sound levels and things like that, and that's going to continue. I also want to make sure that we make the time that we're talking as clear as possible, so getting the ums and ahs and those vocal tics out of the way. I think that transcripts are getting better and faster, and so they're getting easier to do, and we're going to keep on doing that. And especially to our deaf and hard of hearing listeners, but anybody who's consuming the transcripts, please let us know if there's something we can do to make it easier for you. And the last piece I'm going to unveil is that we are going to have intro and outro music along with the intro text. So stay tuned for that. We'll have a big unveiling of that.
Does it involve kazoos?
It probably does not actually involve kazoos.
That's disappointing.
Okay, so we're still working on it. Maybe we can work some kazoos in. It's going to have a lot of sound. It's going to have a lot of sounds. So I can tell you that.
Good. I'm okay with that. Are we also going to leverage Elon Musk's Starlink satellite system in order to broadcast?
If you can make that happen, I'm fully on board with that. But that's news to me. But yeah, I'm all for it. Slightly less ambitious than Elon Musk's Starlink system would be getting some other guests and maybe some higher profile guests. Somebody mentioned earlier that Larry Wall has a very interesting religious point of view, and also he is the progenitor of the Perl programming language, which I have an undying love for. This is a hill I'm willing to die on, that Perl is still valid and useful. So someone said, hey, you should get him on the show. So I am actively pursuing that and a few other guests whose names you might recognize even if you don't know me or Josh or the circles that we run in.
I just want to say that Charity Majors is high on my list this year. Unfortunately, I missed having a chance to chat with Charity last week while I was in San Francisco. Charity, I'm so sorry. I realized as I was wrapping up my week that I didn't reach out because I'm a terrible person. That's why. Right?
Because you were terrible. That's what it was. Not that you were busy learning the ropes of a completely new job and juggling several responsibilities and things like that. No. It's just because you're a bad person.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So to make it up for you, we will invite you onto the show. We'd love to talk about this journey. And then to make it up to you for inviting you onto the show, we will also get together next time I'm in San Francisco.
Same. Since you took time to get, so I met Charity when we were both at DevOps Days Tel Aviv. So Charity, we do not all both have to fly literally around the globe to see each other and get to hang out next time. So there's that. We're going to have some more Tamo interviews. If you are interested in being part of the show, either you want to do Tales from the Tamo Cloud interview or just part of any conversation, we would love to speak to you if you want to be a guest. If you think that you want to try your hand at editing, I will be happy to give up the reins to either the audio or transcription editing responsibilities. Let me know. Again, reach out in social media. And also promotion. I want this year to be more about getting Technically Religious promoted better and more so that we can have more readers, more input, more fun, more goodness. And that leads to something that sort of speaks up your alley, Josh.
Well, I was going to say, if someone happens to have $100 billion laying around and would like to sponsor the show, we would be...
Yeah, we wouldn't use all 100 billion, would we?
No, I mean, at least $1 billion or so we would leave.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, because we're not greedy.
No, it's 99 billion? We can totally make this happen on 99 billion. In all honesty, if you are interested in sponsoring the show, I mean, we've dropped a number of names of vendors during this episode, and not intentionally. We really do appreciate the technology that allows us to deliver the show. But if you're interested in a sponsorship, please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to talk about you, your products, and to also accept your money.
So I think that's a good wrap up. I think that's a good look back at 2019, season 1 The next episode you hear will be the official start of season 2 of Technically Religious.
Yeah, do we have a cliffhanger? Is there some sort of, are you going to poise over me with a knife or?
Right. So Josh, I have to tell you something really important. And we'll fade to black. No, that we're not going to do that.
I was waiting with bated breath. I was going to put it in my any-do so that I could remember to listen to the next episode.
Yes. So just to wrap up, to everyone who's listening, both Josh and I and everyone else who's been part of the show, thank you deeply. We hope that you're going to keep listening as we kick off season 2, and that you will share Technically Religious podcast with your friends, your family, and your coworkers. And while, as you listen to this episode, is probably somewhat belated, we'd like to wish you
a Merry Christmas.
Or Happy Christmas if you're in Britain. Also a Chag Chanukah Sameach.
Happy Kwanzaa.
A joyful winter solstice.
Happy Festivus. For the rest of us.
Thanks for making time for us this week. To hear more of Technically Religious, visit our website, technicallyreligious.com, where you can find our other episodes, leave us ideas for future discussions, and connect us on social media. You really want to end the year with a Festivus joke?
Well, since we can't be in Hawaii,